decides to record. Here we go. Lucy, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to your talk today. I'm going to hand over because I know you've got a lot to say and it's really good stuff all around mindset and what drives us, what's going on in our minds, the courage to challenge that kind of inner critic. So really looking forward to it. So over to you.
Okay, great. Let me just see if I can make the tech work for me and share my screen. It was working a minute ago. Here we go. This is it. Okay, great. So the courage to challenge our stories, a deeper look at what drives the mind. I'm hoping everybody can still see and hear this properly. Shout if you can't. Right, so it takes courage, doesn't it? It takes courage to put your hand up and say, I've got a problem. And it takes courage to admit when you've made a mistake. And it also takes courage to stand up and share when something's gone really well and something you're really proud of. And you want to be able to share that with the world. But it takes courage to do that. Well, why? And that's because you've got a million voices in your head. Before you put your hand up to speak, there's a million voices going through your head saying, oh my God, am I going to be judged? Are they going to think I'm a failure? Are they going to criticize me? Are they going to pull my funding if I tell them what's happened? Or maybe you feel ashamed of the problem and you think, oh no, it's going to reflect badly on me if I put my hand up and tell people what's going on. Or maybe you feel guilty. You got a promotion and you feel guilty about the other people who didn't get it. So you kind of just want to hide your light under a bushel and not really share your own success. Maybe you think people will feel that you're showing off if you share your success. And it's all these things, all this inner talk at a million miles an hour. And we can start catastrophizing. We can start thinking, what's the worst possible case scenario? All these thoughts at a million miles an hour in our head. Catastrophizing what's the worst that's going to happen if I stick my hand up. And this can happen in a matter of seconds or minutes if you keep it going on. Right before you put your hand up, all of these thoughts, what's the worst that's going to happen? And how often does it turn out as bad as you thought? Not often. But despite that, it all comes down to our individual brain programming and our mindset and the stories we've been telling ourselves since birth. So what I'm going to be talking about today, and that's why you can see that picture of me there now, is understanding a bit more about how your brain works and understanding about mindset and how that is a key tool for your mental well-being and also in avoiding burnout. And I'm hoping that today I will also be giving you some courage to take a bit of action. So I'm a certified mindset coach and NLP coach practitioner. And I'm also an author of a book that is a mindset makeover style book. And my background is in organizational culture, change, engagement, communications. So I really do understand a lot of the struggles that people have with change and people have with that sort of thing. But now as well, from a mindset perspective, you can really understand what gets in the way of a lot of transformational stuff when you take a deeper look at what drives the mind and where that's getting in the way of change. So it's a really interesting conundrum to discuss. So you'll have likely learned about icebergs, and you'll know that only 10% of the iceberg is visible above the water. And curiously, this is a little bit like the brain, because 95% of the brain operates subconsciously. And I know that sounds a bit crazy, but it's true. 95% of the brain operates subconsciously, and it's only 5% conscious. And that's because the brain has got so many things to be thinking about. It's got to keep, the blood pumping. It's got to keep the lungs breathing at the same time as looking after all your thoughts and all your emotions. And it's putting all of that on autopilot for you, because that 95% of the brain needs autopilot to keep it going. Because if you tried consciously to do all of that stuff, you'd just burn out, you'd wear out, you couldn't possibly do that. So your brain is creating an autopilot, or, programs, if you will, like a computer program. And as you grow up, your brain starts to make these connections. And it says, if this happens, do that. If this, then that. If this, then that. And so as you grow up and as you experience more of life and you learn people's stories and you absorb what's going on around you, your brain creates these subconscious programs. And they'll all be unique and individual because everybody growing up has a slightly unique set of experiences. And so your autopilot then becomes your first response or your first reaction to what happens in life. And it's interesting because the stories that we've been told all our lives, whether that's the values we've been exposed to, the beliefs we've picked up from parents or teachers, whether it's trauma that we've been through, it could be just society that we grow up in, or societal norms. And these all help us decide what matters to us and what we believe and how we should define success. And, if you find yourself triggered by something, by somebody says or does something, and you find yourself triggered and you feel all these emotions bubbling up, that's your autopilot. Your autopilot is the first immediate reaction that you feel. And a lot of us just go straight into acting based on that, based on these parts of the subconscious brain. And there's interesting things we need to remember about stories. There are stories that we suck up and there's stories that we make up. And so the stories that we suck up happen in childhood. And this is in the imprint phase of development. So this is ages 0 to 7 is where this starts. And then it sort of carries on into our 20s. But this 0 to 7 imprint period, you are soaking up stories like a sponge, and you actually don't have the critical faculty yet. This sort of prefrontal cortex part isn't developed well enough yet for you to even question whether these stories are even true. And so you might be surrounded by negative role models or positive role models, and that will have an impact on whether you grow up with more positive self-talk or more negative self-talk. And negative experiences, they might mean you have less self-belief as you grow up, or you find it harder to build relationships, and the opposite with positive experiences. And then, we're particularly receptive to these stories, and we might internalize these messages that we basically become beliefs for us. They become beliefs for us, and we've not even been able to question them. And let's say we are exposed to stereotypes about certain groups, then we can form an unconscious bias from a really young age, and we are totally unaware of it. So it's just so important to be aware of these stories that we might have just sucked up without questioning. And then, of course, there's the stories that we make up, right? So we could call this the stories we make up, they become our own fake news. And we are wired to learn through stories. We know this. And so we like to have a beginning and a middle and an end to a story. That's just how our brain likes to neatly compartmentalize this thing. We need a beginning and a middle to an end. This has happened, right? What happens in the middle? What happens at the end? How do I close the loop on this story to make it nice and neat to store it in my brain? And so we take in the information and it goes through our unique brain filters. And if there are any gaps in the story, then we make it up. Literally, we do. We make it up. And excuse me. And we delete bits, for this. If there's something that we don't like in the story that doesn't really fit with the way it makes us feel, we might just delete that little part of information from the story. We also distort the story so it fits in a little bit better with, what feels right for us. And if there's a bit missing, we've got a gap in there and we want to finish off this story, we kind of just make it up. We generalize, and we just think, okay, out of all the stories and all the experiences I've ever been exposed to, what's the likely ending here? Okay, that's the ending, I'll give it. We literally make up these stories. And this becomes your brain filter. It becomes your perception. It becomes your way of seeing the world. And it's how good conspiracy theories work. You can convince yourself that your story is true, but it might not be. And, let's think about if you've ever missed a meeting, you've asked 2 different people, Oh, what happened in the meeting? You might have one hand of information from one person, another hand from another person. Some of it will be the same, some of it will be different, and the context might be different, the way it's told might be different. Everybody remembers things differently. I mean, memory is a whole nother topic for another day, but everybody remembers things differently. And the other really good example that actually most people can relate to is, do you remember when you're in an early or new to a relationship and you're waiting for that phone call or that text or that WhatsApp to come in, and it's radio silence? How many stories and excuses did you make up in your head as to why you haven't got that text yet? Oh my God, maybe something's happened to them today. They've got to the hospital and they couldn't ring me. Oh, maybe they're in an all-day meeting. They can't get back to me. Oh, maybe they hate me. Oh, maybe it was that thing that I said and now blah, blah, blah. You're just making up stories in your head. And over the years, these stories become like a database for your thoughts and your emotions and your reactions. And, they make up what you believe to be true. So have you ever told yourself any of these stories? I have to be thin to be beautiful. Or I'll never get that promotion. Or I'm too old to change and learn new things. People like me don't get opportunities like that. Or the good old favourite, I'm not good enough. Whether that's smart enough, thin enough, clever enough, whatever it is enough, I'm not good enough. And have you asked yourself, are these thoughts 100% true? Where do I think this belief has come from? Is it mine? Is it someone else's? And what if you believe something else? So what our brain learns in these influential periods actually ends up forming our identity, so who we think we are, and our beliefs and values, so what we believe and how we choose to show up and what's important to us. And then it tells us what we think we're capable of, and behaviors and habits, how we do things, just the way we behave and the habits that we've got into. So just like a computer, we can update our programs to improve our performance and avoid that blue screen of death. And we can take a look inside and we can see if the programs that we've got are still functioning the way that you need them to today. Considering everything that's changed, the world that you live in now, how technology's evolved, how the world has evolved, how the world of work has evolved, we need to be considering all that's happened and to see whether these things that you formed as identity, beliefs, values, skills, capabilities, behaviors, and habits, whether they're still functioning well enough for you, or perhaps they need a bit of an upgrade. Because without taking a look under the hood, so to speak, and doing the update, you could actually be making decisions based on your 7-year-old self. Always find rather amusing, but it's so true. So to be our most efficient and happy and productive, we need to work on ourselves and work on our mindset and make sure that we're working for us and not against us. Because the thing about the brain is it's wired to keep you safe and it's wired to keep you comfortable. And it wants you to move away from fear and move away from discomfort. So it was programmed back like that in primitive times, when we needed to keep ourselves alive from real and present danger. And the brain just doesn't know the difference between the fear of being eaten by a wolf and the fear of public speaking. Yeah. At the same time, you're both worried that you're going to get eaten alive in each situation. The fear feels real and the brain doesn't know the difference. It's still just all fear. And it creates stress and it creates disease or dis-ease. And it's a bit like if you were getting into the car and you had one foot on the brake and one foot on the accelerator, or either way around, you'd be driving with the brakes on. You are holding yourself back. There's one part of you that wants to drive yourself towards a goal and achieve something, and there's another part that wants to stop you and put the foot on the brake and keep you safe. And that's what we call self-sabotage. And if we're trying to achieve something and meet a goal, but deep down we're feeling that we're not good enough, we're not worthy enough, we're driving with the brakes on. Or if we have created habits that slow us down, like perfectionism or procrastination or overthinking. Do you recognize any of those in yourself? These are habits that are slowing us down, that are making us drive with the brakes on. And we don't get very far when we're driving with the brakes on. In fact, the brakes will wear out. In fact, will burn out. And this is the missing piece. This is the missing piece I see all too often. Not understanding how our brains work, how we tick, and just basic understanding of mindset. It means we can be subconsciously getting in our own way of our own productivity, happiness, and success every single day. We could all be stuck in our cars with one foot on the brake and one foot on the accelerator and being held back by a self-sabotaging seatbelt, which represents your comfort zone. And I don't know whether you remember the first time that you wore a seatbelt, but I was reminded of this the other day. I was in the car with my daughter, and she's grown out of car seats now, and she was sitting in the front seat for the first time, and she was trying to move, and the seatbelt, it was holding her back, and the more she pushed against it, the more it constrained her and held her back. And I had to explain to her, I said, look, if you stop, just sit back, stop, and then slowly stretch the seatbelt, it'll let you move. And, if we stop and give ourselves a moment to understand how we work, and then we slowly stretch our comfort zone, we can achieve a lot more. And then if we can become the co-pilot alongside our autopilot, we can change a few of those old stories to new ones using the magic of neuroplasticity, and we can make a dramatic difference to our performance. We can turn things around. So once we understand mindset, it's like turning a light on in a room we didn't know existed. This is something that my clients always say to me, why has nobody told me this before? Why don't we get taught this? Why don't we know this stuff? And more often than not, we learn this too late. More often than not, we'll learn this after we've already burnt out instead of before, instead of preventing it. And a recent study said that 1 in 10 employees consider quitting their jobs every single day due to burnout. I mean, it's incredible. But if we stop driving with the brakes on, we could make a huge impact on this number. So what can we do? I mean, we know there's a problem. We know the cost of mental well-being is absolutely huge. Recently, Deloitte said that 56 billion was what mental ill health was costing the economy. And then breaking that down a little bit more, what about the 25 billion pounds costing staff turnover? What about the 6 billion in absenteeism? But also importantly, what about the 25 billion pounds that's being lost in presenteeism? People at work but not feeling at their best, not performing at their best, not as well as they could be. So we know that when the people are well, so is the organisation. And we often focus on the physical well-being and we forget the mental wellness is just as important, if not more. So how can we tool people up and businesses up to prevent the crisis before it hits? I mean, you'll have heard of the phrase prevention is better than cure. And I just believe we're missing such a huge opportunity. And, I'm really happy to see the rollout of things like the mental health first aid training across more and more companies. But again, this is dealing with the problem when it's already too late. It's the first aid sticking plaster solution once you're already bleeding, and yeah, all right, we do need a plaster when we're bleeding, but wouldn't it be better if we gave the people climbing the mountain the toolkit that they needed instead of having to send out an expensive rescue team? So, let's introduce ways to prevent letting the problems get so bad in the first place. And neuroscience can empower us to do that because it empowers us to understand ourselves and others better. And if we get a deeper understanding of what drives the mind, we can see the world through a different lens. And businesses are made up of people. So, understanding what drives people, understanding people better, it's a no-brainer that by having that better understanding, we can create a better people experience and work better together. And if we do the mindset work, we can become a better version of ourselves, or an upgrade, if you will. And that has such a massive impact on how people feel and on how people work together and the decisions they make and their behaviors and the actions they take. Think about how many times in your life have you actually upgraded your phone? But what about your mindset? So I think the first thing we need to do is put this on the agenda. Let's get this on the agenda. Excuse me. We need to give ourselves the space to think and the space to rethink. And in an always on busy world, having the space to think is like a luxury, isn't it? It's like gold dust, but we need it. It's what we need. And one key reason that we really need the space to think and rethink is that when we're busy, we aren't operating at our best. In fact, when we're busy and busy without a break, we're stressed. And, you know, stress, yes, it's an unavoidable part of life, and a healthy amount of stress can spark productivity and support motivation and drive you forward, but it isn't sustainable. The stress response in the brain is meant to be temporary. It's meant to switch on quickly to help you react to a dangerous situation. And then it's meant to switch off again and then relax. But we don't do that. So without the rest, we suffer from stress. And if we keep operating under stress, something breaks. And stress is a massive predictor of burnout. So the other thing about stress to remember is we're basically using a much more limited part of our brain. So the cortisol, the stress hormone, is limiting our judgment. It's impairing our judgment, our decision-making abilities, and it constrains our thinking. And that's a lot of constrained thinking going on if we're stressed all the time. You know, if you think about it this way, when we're under stress and we're really busy, we're relying subconsciously on the unconscious part of the brain, on the auto reaction part of the brain. We rely on old habits, old patterns, old ways of working to solve new problems. Or, you know, we make decisions based on the past and not the future. Decisions designed for a world that happened already, instead of what's coming next. So we can fix this, though. We can fix this. And there are some really simple things that we can do as well, just to get ourselves out of that stress state and into a more productive state. Even things as simple and free as learning how to breathe can actually just help you, reset, give yourself that space to think, get you out of the stress state. So it sounds simple, but we don't always do it. We don't always give ourselves the space to think and the space to rethink. And if you do this alongside learning the simple neuroscience, then it means we can use the power of our mind for us. And we stop driving with the brakes on. So even as little as 1 hour a month can make an absolutely massive difference to you. It sounds crazy, but just that 1 hour of learning about mindset, learning about neuroscience, thinking about things differently, creating yourself some space to look at things differently, it makes a huge difference. But how often do we do it? So it can be a game changer, understanding some of this simple neuroscience. And I just wonder why companies have taken so long, Why have we taken so long to embrace what it can do? And is it because people, asking people to look a bit deeper into how they tick, maybe that feels like it's crossing a bit of a boundary? Or is it because it takes courage to challenge the way we've always done things? Or is it because some companies just aren't aware of the potential of incorporating this mindset work and the things it can have a positive impact on? So how about a bit of new thinking? And when I say new, I mean neuroscience empowering wellness. We can apply neuroscience to help prevent burnout and create happier, productive teams. And some of this stuff that people might not realize it can help us do, it can help us retain talent, avoid burnout, handle change better, increase engagement, reduce stress and anxiety, improve communication and collaboration, improve work relationships, increase emotional resilience, reduce toxic culture, and ultimately improve performance. So, it's a bit of a no-brainer that we should start applying some new thinking, and let's get it on the agenda. And the thing is, it just takes courage to put your hand up. Like I said at the beginning, it takes courage to put your hand up and say, we've got a problem with burnout, or we've got a problem with well-being. But, it's time we got honest with ourselves, and it's time that we notice that stories and excuses go together. Stories and excuses go together just the same as wellness and productivity. And let's just think about that. We know that when people are well, so is the organization. So let's take some action. Let's give people the right tools to get up the mountain so that we don't have to send out the expensive rescue team and the first aid kit. And I can help you do that. That's what I could help you do. So my question to you is, are we really too busy to introduce this work? Or is that just a story we're telling ourselves? And, are we going to use neuroscience to empower wellness? Are we going to apply it to prevent burnout and to create happier, more productive teams? And it's up to you, really. Are you brave enough to put your hand up and get it on the agenda? And if you are, here I am. Let's make some space to chat. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And you can drop me a DM. My details are just there. Or you can email me, just put chat in the subject line and I'll know what it's about. Lucy@leadingconversations.co.uk. Or you can use this fancy QR code that will take you through to my sort of profile page in Recommended. And you can send me a message. You can send me a message via that. So do get in touch. Put your brave pants on. Put your hand up. And let's get these problems